Now, Avon and Somerset Police today took the extraordinary step of banning a national broadcaster from a press conference about the Joanna Yates murder investigation. They justified the ITV ban, saying its News at 10 report last night was naive, unfair and irresponsible. They have now lifted the ban, but threatened to repeat it if, they say, reporters hamper their investigation. So what has led to this breakdown of trust between police and media? Here's Matt Prodger.
From Madeleine McCann to Raoul Moat, from Ian Huntley to the Ipswich murders, we know so well the faces of crime in the information age.
Tonight, armed police are on the streets.
24/7 News has brought immediacy, intimacy and stretched the relationship between media and police to breaking point. And so it is with the case of Jo Yates, the latest high-profile murder investigation, and a spat between Avon and Somerset Police and ITV News. The cause of it was a report broadcast last night critical of the police for failing after 2.5 weeks to find the killer.
Since Monday, we have also taken another...
In response, the police barred ITV News journalists from this press conference earlier today, then lodged a complaint with the broadcast regulator Ofcom for, as the police put it, unfair, naive and irresponsible reporting. They said ITV's coverage would hamper the investigation. ITV said the police action was counterproductive.
He should not, however, institute a ban on a legitimate news organisation from attending a press conference. And I might add, some people might find that a bit irresponsible, given that the press conference was held to get maximum publicity for the fact that one of Joe's socks had gone missing. Now, we go out to millions of people who might not have seen that because of this summary ban on our cameras and our reporter.
There have already been tensions. Last week, media scrutiny of Jo Yates' landlord, Christopher Jeffries, prompted the Attorney General to warn newspaper editors they risked prejudicing any future trial. Mr. Jeffries was released by police, his only offences thus far apparently being eccentricity and a love of poetry. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann demonstrated the perils of massive media coverage when confronted with a leaky police investigation and a lack of leads. Overheated speculation led to British newspapers paying libel damages to 10 people so far, 2 of them Madeleine's parents. But it was the thoroughly modern death of Raoul Moat, live on TV after a media manhunt, that seemed to some a step too far. One police chief has also complained that commanding officers on high-profile cases are now spending up to half their time dealing with the media. In the final hours of Raoul Moat's life, police frustration with photographers was clearly evident. The killer of Jo Yates remains at large tonight, and a needy embrace still binds journalists and detectives. One seeks news, the other information, and both of them need leads.
Matt Prodger. Well, Ian Blair, the former Metropolitan Police Commissioner, is with us again, and we're also joined by Stuart Purvis, who was Chief Executive of ITN until 2003 and is currently a Professor of Television Journalism at the City University in London. Stuart Purvis, first of all, you saw that report last night. In your view, was there anything that was naive, unfair, irresponsible?
Well, as I understand it, the dispute between ITV News and the Avon and Somerset Police very much centres on, was the police force given a chance to comment on the criticisms that were given, actually in a report by a former policeman as much as they were by ITV journalists. So that's a classic case of taking it to Ofcom, where I've actually worked until quite recently, handling these sorts of complaints. That, I think, is the right thing for the police to have done. Clearly they're under enormous stress and strain. It's a high-profile murder case. If they think they've been treated unfairly, they should take it to the regulator. What I don't think they should do is the next step they took.
Banning them for the
banning from them. And I have to say, I don't think they made the situation any better when, to try to get themselves out of the hole they'd got themselves into, they talked about this threat to do it again if the media hampered their investigation, as if a criticism, whether that was from the former policemen or from journalists, was hampering their investigation.
It seems, Ian Blair, that there was just simply a frustration and annoyance on the police side that they were being criticised in the report last night. Is that any justification, do you think, from banning media from a press conference?
I don't normally comment on ongoing investigations, but in this case I would suggest that banning journalists is not necessarily the right approach. But I think there's something much more important behind all of this, which is that the rhythm of 24-hour journalism in the competitive marketplace that currently exists and the rhythm of a criminal investigation are extremely different. And the demand for more information and more information and more information is a really difficult position for the police when they don't want to give it, sometimes because they don't know it, and secondly because they don't want to give it away in the first place.
Is that a legitimate
Yeah, I think that, first of all, we had, if you like, the old media. They had 24/7 news channels. I think the 24/7 news online has been a really big step forward, because it's enabled newspaper journalists to break stories ahead of the morning publication, and therefore they're in the exclusives game absolutely 24 hours a day, which they didn't used to be. So there is much more pressure going on out there.
And do you think either, actually, journalists, new journalists, and new police are actually equipped to deal with the stresses and strains of that constant demand, for information, legitimate demands for information?
Well, I think the police have got used to 24/7 in terms of news. Perhaps what they haven't got used to is 24/7 comment. I think that's been a big change in recent years. I mean, when I looked tonight at the Avon and Somerset police statement on Facebook, and I thought, my God, 5 years ago, would you have had a police force issuing a statement on a social network? Nothing wrong with that, but it's a sign of the times. And there are people commenting on that statement tonight who have no idea that there's a contempt of court or contempt process that could be taken against them. So these are just remarkable times, and one can understand why the police are having trouble coping with it.
In the public interest is different from what the public actually are interested in.
Oh, you've always been that case. I think there's a couple of things that the police need to do. One is, I think, to separate the man or woman in charge of the investigation from being the spokesman. That certainly is what the Met has done for years and years and years, and left a spokesman to deal with the press and let the officer in charge carry on. But it also requires some responsibility from the press. I mean, in the aftermath of the 21/7 bombings, I remember having to get hold of the editor of Sky to get a journalist off the air because she was explaining what the police were doing in terms of going into the stronghold where the terrorists were eventually found. I mean, there are things that we are now in a position that the Moat case shows, that actually you can see live police operations on television, and that does produce perhaps a requirement for a new code somewhere about what can and cannot be done.
I mean, the thing is, of course, that the police and media need each other desperately. I mean, the police need the media for the information to get out. Yeah. But do you think there has to be a new training scheme, a new code of the way that actually they interact with each other?
There are quite a few codes around already, and not everyone knows what code they're under at any one time.
Is that a problem, then?
I think there is, I mean, quite obviously there are people who are publishing by actually putting their material out there, who actually are not aware that they're subject to any codes or that there might be legal action taken against them. And you can understand how this has come about. I wrote a piece a few years ago saying anybody can now be a journalist. And the truth is, anybody can be a journalist, depending on how you define a journalist.
But in a sense, editors need to be noticing when you get this combination of, if you like, the ideal victim, and I'm afraid that's where Joe Yates fits with Madeleine McCann, and the apparently eccentric suspect. Those two things together produce a real circumstance in which the liberty of the suspect begins to become very endangered.
But just briefly on regulation, do you believe that regulation is the way to deal with it?
No, I don't know. If we could regulate the press, we would be in a different world. I don't think that's going to happen either on your show or anybody else's.
Thank you both very much indeed.